Hello and welcome to the virtual towers of Binary Arcadia, where the games go on long into the night. Many of you will have seen the latest trailer for Death Stranding, and if you haven't already, definitely go and see that because it's really good. And at this point we were planning to do an analysis on it, but since then the reviews have dropped and we think it will be definitely more relevant to do almost like a review roundup, which we're now going to do. But before we get into that, it would be good to just give you an idea of how that day went for us, because it started out 7 a.m. when the reviews dropped with extremely mixed emotions. The first one, I think, Tabz, you saw it, didn't you? The first review.
Yeah, unfortunately, the first review I dropped onto was the IGN review, which, as we know now, it's pretty much infamous, and it scored 6.8 out of 10. And you know, we've invested so much into this game, haven't we? We're massive Kojima fans of Death Stranding, and it did kind of felt pretty gutting. It was
jarring, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit of a sucker punch, and even though, you know, and since then I think we've put some thought into it, which was help us to kind of work through it, if you like, as kind of silly as that might sound, but it's still IGN, isn't it? It's still a big publication, a mainstream publication, and it's still, you know, a valid opinion in many ways. We'll talk later on as to why we think we feel in a better place with it now, but at the same time, I can't pretend that I wasn't gutted and that I wasn't hugely disappointed, because despite anything else, it has the potential to be hugely damaging to Kojima and Kojima Productions. So yeah, I think we just wanted to be honest, didn't we, with all the Barcadians and Death Stranding fans out there. It was a rough day.
It was. I mean, I think during the day we managed to watch more reviews, read more reviews, and see more of a general consensus in the industry about the game. And I think that in some way allayed some of our
fears,
thoughts, worries, you know. And I'm sure many of you have seen the reviews have been incredibly mixed. We've had perfect scores from some people. We've had like down to 6 out of 10s, and including this 6.8 from IGN. And I'd just like to say for clarity at this point that we're going to disregard a very outlying review from a person called Stiviver, who gave this a 35 out of 100 or a 3.5 out of 10. It seems to be an anomaly. We're not sure why they scored it so low, but certainly for this roundup of reviews, we've put that one to the side because it seems like an anomaly.
I know, just to interject, Rich, and I'll throw back to you very quickly, but I feel, you know, that is one of these contrarian reviews which is just courting controversy for the sake of clicks. I really don't think there's a lot of genuine credibility that you can put into that review.
I completely agree, and also the weight of support for that is the fact that his website actually crashed because of the traffic going to it from that review drop. So if that was his...
It basically became a lightning rod for negativity, and we know there are a lot of naysayers around the game. They want to see it fail seemingly, and you know, I suppose I personally think that person was going for that, but you know, moving on.
Definitely. So what have people said about the game? Well, let's start with the positives. So people have said it's one of the most original games of this generation. The world is breathtaking. A fellow YouTuber, Yong Yi, actually stated that it looks like a Bob Ross painting. And if you're not sure who Bob Ross is, definitely go and check him out on videos on YouTube.
We'll flash him up now, Rich, just to help illustrate.
Yeah,
he's
nice.
Iconic.
He's a character, definitely. Character models, voice acting, and personalities are amazing, all being said. And it's graphically stunning, certainly one of the best of this generation. Cutscenes are amazing. To be fair, it's to be expected that there will be lots of cutscenes given the fact it's a Kojima game. The score and soundtrack are outstanding, and the lots of innovative mechanics and designs within the game which really set it apart from others. But having said those pros, what have people actually said? So we're just going to dive into a few little quotes from various publications on what people have actually said. So The Guardian said, and I quote, "Over time your relationship with Death Stranding may start to shift, but it's a slow burn album track, not a pop hit.
Love that.
And they went on to say, yet despite everything, the game somehow pulls you through, creating a cycle of punishment and reward in a technically brilliant blockbuster experience, quite unlike anything that's come before.
Next up, we've got Tim Rogers of Kotaku, who I really implore you to go and watch his 1 hour kind of video review. It's so quirky, eccentric, very Kojima, but there's a lot of good content in there as well. So his description of the game was, it is the Gran Turismo of walking simulators, which
Nice.
I love.
Trusted Reviews, who scored this a perfect score, said, Kojima Productions has done a stellar job ensuring every little system informs and enhances a rather pedestrian activity into something truly special. I laughed, I cried, and I grinned like a stupid idiot at the absurdity of it all. By the end, I was left wanting more. Death Stranding is a one-of-a-kind, cementing itself as a weird, wonderful masterpiece.
The Sixth Axis had to say, you may think that delivering packages which can range from pizzas to humans doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but you'll be wrong. Safely delivering a package is immensely satisfying. And they go on to say, however, you have to buy into Death Stranding. If you didn't like Kojima's previous titles, this is not going to change your mind. It's massively self-indulgent at times.
And I think that's a perfect illustration, and we'll come on to that more later on. The Daily Star said, the game loop is so pithy, so rife with unexpected chaos and electrifying discoveries that I struggled to pull myself away from it. Balancing hopelessness with hope in a way that I truly wasn't expecting. A cathartic and welcome feeling in our divided and troubled times, where there are no easy answers to our problems.
And then finally, from Skill Up, this one, and again, another great video review and YouTuber that I implore you go and check out his very glowing review of the game. But akin to describing the Odyssey as the story of a boat ride, or To Kill a Mockingbird is the story of a court case, or The Sopranos as a story about gangsters, it takes the experience and reduces it to its most rudimentary fundamental components, glossing over the unique complexity, nuance and genius that makes this game so extraordinary. Because make no mistake, Death Stranding is absolutely remarkable.
High praise indeed, but let's look at the negatives that some people have said about the game. Boss battles can often be frustrating and some are a little too easy, seemingly just a series of button bashes to get through it. There's some silly jokes and weird cameos in there.
So I suppose that's against the tone of the piece, isn't it, as a whole at times? But
I guess so, yeah. It's not fun in the typical way you would expect from a video game. Inside spaces are very much all the same in all bases, quite bland, could have done with more. It's very slow paced, which some people might not like. And the balancing act of the world, the balancing you need to do in the world is very annoying apparently, but some people have said they got to grips with that, some people haven't. So let's just look at what people actually said. So the Metro said, but taken as a whole, Death Stranding is an awkward mishmash of ideas, some of which work exactly as intended and others which feel entirely out of place. At 40 plus hours it overstays its welcome, but it's still a fascinating journey to take, with Kojima being the only video game's auteur who could still command a large budget and use it to create something that just isn't pandering to the mainstream tastes.
IGN said, spending close to an hour schlepping heavy cargo through waist-deep snow up and down mountains, constantly pushing against fierce winds in a pair of shoes that wear out over time, isn't an enjoyable video game mission.
Game Informer said, combat is also part of Sam's travels, but it's not demanding or engaging. Like Sam himself, I often wasn't sure why I kept going in Death Stranding. Maybe there was a little bit of pride in another task checked off the list, another job done. Unfortunately, this added up to little reward in the end. And they went on to say the game bears the unmistakable mark of its creator, but doesn't leave enough for the players to enjoy.
And then finally, VGC had this to say. If only the narrative that encloses all this wasn't a bunch of old rope. Death Stranding is an unusual and fascinating game by AAA blockbuster standards, but its workings are clogged by its creator's self-importance. A bloated, showy, post-apocalyptic melodrama that makes a meal of some engrossing mechanics and themes.
So I think you can see from that the reviews are wildly different, and we've seen that in the scores. I think it's sitting currently as a Metacritic score of 84, but if you scroll down the list of scores on there, they range from the outlier of 35, but from like 60 to 100. That's literally the broad spectrum of them, which is crazy to be so divided.
Yeah, I mean, 84 is a respectable score. We shouldn't forget that. And I think for the most part, the reviews are positive, but we can't forget the fact that there are some big publications there, respectable publications, that have given it, you know, a less than glowing review. So yeah, it's like I said, it's a difficult one to take, but you know, hopefully we're going to talk about a little bit more as to perhaps why that divisiveness exists, just to kind of help to kind of work through it. As I say, you know, for Rich and I, it's been an interesting few days, and hopefully just kind of allay some fears with other Death Stranding fans out there.
And it's been a mixture of emotions through devastation, gutting, acceptance, understanding, but I think more than anything, we've got the hope that we will enjoy this game and that it's going to be something for us, and we go into it with that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go in neutral. I don't want to foreclose how I'm going to feel. That there might be every possibility that I'm, you know, going to come out the back end of this game and maybe I'm feeling a bit mixed, like some of these reviews. But certainly, you know, I think our mindset now is, you know, steadfast. We are going to be, yeah, like you say, Rich, open-minded to the experience, and we're not going to draw conclusions too early on it. That's for sure.
So I think to round off this video, let's hand over to Father Tabz and a little piece he's put together about why it might be such a divisive game.
Thanks for the introduction, Rich. Yeah, I suppose I wanted to get some thoughts down, and I've done it in such a way as to try and make them as succinct as possible. And you know, disclaimer on this one, I don't think my word is God. This is just my reasonings, some thought I've put into it, which may be useful to you, but could just as easily be me trying to explain away, you know, my concerns and my fears about the game. So this could very well be a contrivance of my own to try and help me work through it. But, you know, see what you think, draw your own conclusions. So, reviews. They are and can be very useful. In simple terms, they're an attempt to find a bearing of quality, usually within an accepted medium. To do that, we have to put things in boxes, reduce things down, draw comparisons, pull from our experiences, and ultimately form an opinion. Add a deadline to that, and often that opinion is reduced to a quick and dirty approximation of sometimes nebulous thoughts and feelings. The point is, that opinion has significant limitations. What makes matters worse in the case of Death Stranding is that it's not a conventional video game. Kojima has openly shared his ambition for it to be new and revolutionary, genre-defining. It therefore defies categorization purposely and attempts to break the mold. And seemingly it has done so successfully, because when you apply a conventional video game review framework, which we've seen to varying degrees in many reviews, it rejects the method. What you have is a game which doesn't behave like a conventional game. It's not chock full of instantly gratifying thrills and spills at every turn. It's not necessarily a perfectly paced rush of successive dopamine hits. It's not built from the ground up to pander to the player's every want and whim. God forbid, it appears to make you work for those moments of satisfaction it offers. It wants to redefine the relationship between player and game, and in the process evoke an experience which reaches beyond the confines of a more conventional video game. And that is perhaps the reason why it's being received quite so divisively in critical opinion. Some are able to establish that new relationship, others aren't, and some have found an in-between. Take the IGN review, for example. It came across to me like the person who wrote it went into the game stone cold, cynical and critical from minute one. They did not seem open-minded to the game being anything more than the sum of its parts, and appeared to judge it purely as a video game. And I don't think that's the right way to understand this game and get the best from the experience. A valid review for some, I'm sure, but not for me. Which is why I made my peace with it after some thought. Furthermore, I think the reviewer unwittingly illustrates a problematic culture which I believe Kojima is passing commentary on within the game. As the publication Post Arcade put it in their review, Death Stranding's commentary on our culture's growing reliance on having the world delivered to our doors. We are and have become an incredibly entitled society in many ways. We are spoiled with choice and convenience, and video games are no exception to that. It's on this basis that the reviewer seems to reject the game. He frequently punctuates the review with disgruntled sentiments in the face of Death Stranding's more demanding gameplay loop. And this appears to put him in a mood from the off that he just couldn't shake, a feeling of resentment for the game that ends up colouring his entire experience. And rather than look inwardly and ask himself if he might be part of the frosting on the glass, to refer to a simile he uses to describe the game, he blames the game outright. He insists it is Kojima who is taking the piss, perhaps because his mindset is such that he expects the game to be given to him on a plate, on his terms. He rejects the attempt to reframe the relationship between player and game, as we've discussed. What Kojima is perhaps trying to say with this commentary, well, I'll save us any rampant philosophizing and let you draw your own conclusions. But perhaps it's something along the lines of a problematic mindset that prevents us from connecting properly these days, and instead tends towards division and polarization. And whilst we're talking about the characteristically onerous gameplay rhythm, let's talk about Kojima's decision to focus the gameplay of Death Stranding on one of the most basic contrivances in video games: fetch quests. Ironically, he's used that hackneyed foundation to package a game which he hails as revolutionary, because within that structure he seems to bend the rules at every opportunity to reach beyond the typical conventions of a game, exploring beyond those limitations in the process. And I don't think that is accidental. The heavy simulation elements, I think, are a way of bridging the video game experience to the player to make it more comparable to a real-life experience. Long, arduous fetch quests would be boring, frustrating, and grueling in real life. But in doing so, we are connected more than ever to the game world, in a way which demands more of us than we may be used to, sobering and almost rehabilitating at times, perhaps. We aren't experiencing virtual beats and rhythms, those akin to Breath of the Wild, for example, which are artificial and fantastical. Gratifying, no doubt, but artificial no less. We are experiencing more closely the genuine emotions that such quests would actually evoke, an exploration of ourselves in a much more realistic sense then. Less about immersion, perhaps, in the way we traditionally escape into a video game, and more about forming a connection. An awareness between the player and game which becomes more than just a projection into a virtual world, and instead something more akin to an actual relationship. It's not the perfect comparison, but I think Death Stranding is likely to strike a similar tone to the classic Shadow of the Colossus, another stripped back, often profound experience which belied the simplicity of its gameplay loop. So just to finish, Death Stranding is peak Kojima. An unadulterated vision of one hugely eccentric man, wonderfully so, perhaps the most honest product we'll ever see in the gaming landscape. It was always bound to split opinion and cause controversy, and I think a large part of that divide is informed by preconceptions of what the game is or should be about, and what you think of the hype machine and fanfare that has led up to its release. The reviews seem coloured in that way by the individual's perception. I mean, in many ways, Death Stranding is a projection of Kojima's personality and psyche. It's a pilgrimage through his mind. Some have waited for that with bated breath, like Rich and I. Others have sneered at it with contempt. As people, we can't be all things to all people, not without compromising that which makes us real, honest, and true. And that's the risk Kojima has taken by plastering his name across the game. He's also taken the responsibility of that. He's put it all out there, self-indulgently perhaps, with pride in his creation. And I myself admire it, and I can't wait to explore that creation. What my feelings will be after it, who knows? But I'm ready and I'm willing. However, if you are just looking for an instantly gratifying, stubbornly conventional, watered-down attempt at a game which tries to be all things to all people, sacrificing its character, originality, and message in the process, well then you probably will give Death Stranding 6.8 out of 10. It's idiosyncratic, clearly, and problematic. It frustrates as much as it rewards. It's real, honest, and three-dimensional. Just like connecting with another person in the real world, it demands a tolerance and understanding which doesn't come easily. But that is connection. That is empathy and understanding. That is love.